Bangladesh, a nation brimming with youthful energy, found itself at a crossroads in the summer of 2024. The spark? A High Court decision on June 5th that reignited a long simmering debate about the country's quota system for government jobs. This system, designed to uplift marginalized communities, had become a point of contention, with many perceiving it as unfair and biased. Students, already grappling with a competitive job market and a system they felt was rigged against them, saw this as the last straw. Social media became a battleground of opinions, with hashtags like #Quota Reform Now and #Justice for Students trending nationwide. The outrage was palpable, the demand for change deafening. This was not just about quotas, it was about their future, their right to a level playing field. The initial protests were scattered, spontaneous outbursts of anger and frustration. Students from various universities in Dhaka, the nation's capital, poured onto the streets, their voices echoing their discontent. They demanded a complete overhaul of the quota system, one that was merit-based and fair to all. The holy month of Ramadan, followed by Eid al-Adha, brought a temporary lull to the protests. The students may have retreated temporarily, but their resolve remained unbroken. As July approached, the protests resumed with renewed vigor, this time joined by a new force, the teachers. They too had grievances against the government, particularly a new pension scheme they felt was disadvantageous. The movement was gaining momentum, evolving into something bigger than themselves. The government's response to the escalating protests was swift and uncompromising. Universities, seen as hotbeds of dissent, were ordered to close indefinitely. This only served to further inflame the situation, radicalizing the students and pushing them to take more drastic measures. On July 7th, a new chapter unfolded in the movement, the Bangla Blockade. This nationwide strike, organized under the banner of Boishommyo Birodhi Chhatro Andolon, brought the nation to a standstill. Major roads and railway lines were blocked, crippling transportation and disrupting daily life. The Bangla blockade had exposed the deep fissures within Bangladeshi society, the growing chasm between the government and the people it claimed to represent. The storm brews. A day of reckoning approaches. As the Bangla blockade tightened its grip on the nation, the government found itself increasingly isolated. The international community, initially silent, began to take notice, expressing concern over the escalating violence and the crackdown on dissent. Human rights groups condemned the government's heavy-handed tactics, calling for restraint and dialogue. The Appellate Division, in an attempt to defuse the situation, issued a 4-week status quo order on July 10th, coinciding with Freedom Day. The irony was not lost on the protesters. Despite the court order and mounting international pressure, the protests continued unabated. The stage was set for a confrontation, a showdown between the irresistible force of the student movement and the immovable object of the government's authority. July 14th. A nation on edge. The tension that had been building for weeks reached a fever pitch on July 14th. A statement by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, the exact content of which remains shrouded in controversy, ignited a firestorm of outrage. Perceived by many as insensitive and dismissive of the protesters' concerns, it served as a catalyst, pushing the already volatile situation to the brink. That Sunday afternoon, Dhaka witnessed one of the largest demonstrations since the movement began. Tens of thousands of students, joined by ordinary citizens, flooded the streets, their chants of "We want justice" echoing through the city. The government's response was swift and brutal. The events of that day sent shockwaves throughout the nation, leaving many wondering if Bangladesh was on the verge of a full-blown revolution. July 15th, a day of violence and uncertainty. The morning of July 15th dawned with an eerie silence, the calm before the storm. The government, determined to crush the movement, unleashed its full might on the protesters. The Chhatra League, the student wing of the ruling Awami League, joined the fray, adding another layer of complexity and brutality to the conflict. Reports emerged of protesters being beaten, detained, and even abducted. Social media, once a platform for dissent, was flooded with images and videos of the violence, sparking international condemnation. As the sun began to set on July 15th, the situation remained volatile and uncertain. The question on everyone's mind was how much more blood would be spilled before their voices were heard.